Hello and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection with your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our goal is to engage the greater protection community, inspire innovative thought, and as always, continue the conversation around all things close protection. Let's see what the guys are talking about this time.
Good evening and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection Shop Talk Edition. My name is Chuck Randolph. Across the digital divide is the substantiated Mr. Chris Story. Sir, good evening. Good to see you.
Yeah, good evening. I was wondering why you pointed. Then I realized we're recording this for
video, man.
The tube.
Once a month.
I forgot.
The kids like the videos.
Okay.
How are you doing, man?
TikToks. I'm good.
TikToks.
I'm good. How are you?
By the way, Chris, we have a TikTok presence. We have no TikToks, but there is a Conversations in Close Protection TikTok account.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see who. Nope.
I don't know, but we do have one. Seriously, how are you doing?
Good. I'm good. Freaking busy. Ramping and cranking. How about you?
Good, man. As you know, I was down in the great state or nation of Texas, however you look at it, came back. I will say I've traveled, I haven't traveled as much as you have in the last 6 months, but this last time I traveled, it was almost as if the airport was back to normal.
Oh, dude.
And that sucks, but it also, I think it goes back to something we've been saying for a long time. Q3 of this year, I have a feeling it's going to break out. People are going to be busy. Again, we already see our compadres and colleagues all ramping up to get ready. So I feel like, Netflix recently, just announced a bit of a loss quarter over quarter. So I think there's a lot of folks that are getting ready or poising to say we're going to get back out there.
Or restless, right? So I was listening to the radio this morning. They're talking about like the lack of travel and the impact, and they were saying like everybody and their brother are freaking ramping up for it, right? And they're also saying that supposedly, if you want to get a rental car in Hawaii, at this point it's $500 a day for just some like shit box, right?
Yeah.
If you want a Mercedes or a BMW, it's $1,000 a day. And I think everybody's just trying to recoup their losses from the last year. And apparently they did a poll. I don't know who ran the poll, but this was on the radio this morning. They said that apparently everybody's planning on spending their stimulus money on, or a lot of people are planning on spending their stimulus money on vacations. They said folks are looking to spend $5,000 to $8,000 to do it live and just get out, right? Yeah. So it's going to be just a gigantic escape from New York. People dumpster fire everywhere you go, what's
interesting about that, if you think about it, like if you have no water in the pipes for a year and you just crank that sucker on,
all the shit
what's
that comes
potential
out?
That yeah, or what happens. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, and I mean, and what the ramifications are for our industry and everything else. Like all of a sudden nobody's doing anything, and now let's go. We're gonna entertainers make money by entertaining, and you can only actors make money by acting. People make money by being out there. Even though I saw something.
Lots of pulled hamstrings. That's all I'm saying. Lots of pulled hamstrings.
My hammy.
Yep, pull the hammy.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. So what else has been going on? What have you been reading lately? What are you up to?
So I think it's okay. I'm going to tell you kind of a funny story. I used to listen to this podcast a lot, and it was called Starting from Nothing, and it was by this guy, Andy and Dane. And Dane went on this, like, they used to be really awesome to listen to. And Dane was, I listened to Andy a lot, then listened to Dane a little bit, and you get familiar with them. And then suddenly Dane went off and was doing some, like, he was on this like personal enrichment journey, except he like went way too far with it. anyways, so I've been reading some personal development stuff, a lot of that, and I like John Kim, the Angry Therapist. He kind of speaks to me.
Oh, I love him.
He's just really down to earth. And then I've been reading, I read those 2 books a day, and that's just kind of whatever it is, business, personal development, introspection. But our good friend Josh Burmeister told me about, I guess he was like mid-book. He said he was 30% in. He was like, dude, you got to read this. So it's a book called Violence of Mind, Training and Preparation for Extreme Violence by Varg Freeborn. And first off, with a name like Varg, you get this sense that he's a freaking Viking that just, kind of waded ashore and just started freaking cutting a bunch of people with his freaking broadsword. But cool thing.
Does not look like one, though.
No.
Father and a family man.
Yeah. But I think the cool thing about his story is that he's essentially he's a reformed felon and spent time in prison and his essentially his claim to fame is his study of violence, and now he's an up and coming premier trainer. I'd like to get him on the podcast specifically because of his no nonsense approach to training, and its functionality, and he breaks down a lot of stupid range theatric thought processes, and he calls them as he sees them. And I was listening to it as I was working out, and I'm just laughing and freaking giggling, in mid burpees or whatever I'm doing, because I'm like, yeah, dude, you got it. Like this, we got to hear this guy. He's freaking awesome,
Yeah. Awesome. I have it ordered and it's en route. I guess I should have thought like you did and got the audiobook, but I ordered it. I've been reading, obviously I'm finishing up The Right Kind of Crazy. As you know, I don't think the audience would know by now, but we've got Clint Emerson coming up. So pouring through all of his stuff.
Yeah. I thought for a second there, I forgot that was Clint's book. I was like, had visions of, Sybil and what was it, Glenn Close. Never The Right Kind of Crazy, actually, but yeah, go on.
Well, so I've been finishing that up, and then of course, then 100 Deadly Skills, the combat edition, which again, I mean, really had a great conversation with him the other day. No pun intended, with you and Clint and myself talking about his upbringing. I look forward to bringing that to the crew, and as we start to continue, to mature what we're looking at and how we're thinking about things, and as we get closer to that 100th episode that's coming up in July.
Yeah, I think so. As I was thinking about that, folks have to wonder, like, what do these guys talk about all the time, right? Like, one day they're talking to some guy about strategy, and next it's operations, and then they're talking about some freaking Varg Freeborn, the Viking warrior. But at the end of the day,
Freeborn.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we break it down into strategic, operational and tactical, and we try to have a good combination of all, because those are who our listeners are, and really, I don't care who you are. If you're a practitioner, you should be focused on the tactical piece as well, right? And the thing that I really, really enjoy about all those folks that we've brought on with tactical is that, like, if you're already John Wick or a ninja, thanks, Clint, then you can do it live. But what about your family, right? What about your friends? What about your significant other, right? And so I think that the professionals that we bring, on are the I hate to say tip of the spear, but I'll use that because nothing else comes to mind, with their training philosophies, techniques, what they're doing. And then of course they're sharing those with other people. I mean, like, and then the really cool thing is like, on LinkedIn, Tony Blair and Clint Emerson, collaborating on, self-defense and what that looks like. I mean, people have called Clint Emerson, one of the deadliest dudes on the planet. And here he is, like, okay, cool. Well, it's like a bad joke, right? It's going to freaking come out the wrong way whoever walks into the bar after Clint Emerson and freaking Tony Blair.
Well, and then the other thing too is, like, and we're not going to give anything away, but we ask him, like, what should protectors be thinking about? I mean, you have been called one of the most deadliest folks in the world, and you kind of got paid as an operative to look at it from the other side. What should we be concerned about? So, I mean, I think it's cool that we find these folks that, as you say, are innovators, tips of the spear that are saying, here's what we have, here's what we're thinking about. We want to give it to the community. We recognize what you guys are doing, and we want to help up the game.
Yeah, and all connected to close protection in terms of, your ability to defend yourself, your principles, your family, and then of course, training perspective, self-defense, and any tactics, techniques, and procedures.
I got a nice text the other day from someone who I don't have permission to say their name online, and they said, "Hey, look, the thing I love about you guys' podcast is it's close protection and so much more. It's not only about, it's not, we learn about tactics. We get some guy one day that's talking to us about training and tactics. And then you get somebody the next day that's talking about like threat management, like Phil Grindell or somebody, and, appreciate that we're trying to think about things three-dimensionally from, like you say, tactics, tactical, operational, strategic, both as part of the business and running a business. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's humbling, some of the stuff we get, and we do get our fair amount of people that will tell us when we're wrong about something, and that's okay too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Chris is not substantive, or whatever, or you pronounced it wrong. Oh, okay.
Oh, I get plenty of that. You said it wrong, mate. I got interesting today. I was on the circuit had a conference, a virtual conference, and they were talking about understanding like digital issues for protection folks, like digital identity, digital keys, managing access, all those things. And I'm on the panel, and the panel starts up, and I look at it, and there's three of 5 people, including myself.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 of the 3 people other than myself had all been on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize that. So when the panel starts, I'm like, oh,
yeah, old home week.
There's Phelim, there's Mac, and there's Danny. And I just laughed, and I thought to myself, it's like, instead of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, it was like 6 degrees of CICP.
Right.
But it also made me feel good in understanding that the folks that we're bringing on are also folks that other people are recognizing as, as potential thought leaders in the community.
Yeah. Well, it is a small community, but again, I can't say enough about how many awesome people are in the space. I mean, just as we look at what we pushed out this year, some incredible people. Will Geddes, Kate Bright, Craig Douglas, Mark James, Dean Stott, Spencer Corson, multiple authors, right? I mean, it's just it's pretty crazy that we get the opportunity to share those stories, but more importantly, the value that they bring, right? I mean, essentially, that's what we bring people forward to do, is to we identify the value they bring the industry, and we want to be able to share that story, and hopefully other folks benefit from it, and I think people are benefiting from it. So we got some pretty cool and differentiated guests coming up.
Well, not to. I think I've mentioned it before, and we put it on the grams, but you, my friend, again, received some ONTIC honors in protective intelligence. So, also good to see that the work is recognized, and, not only the work of the CICP crowd, but you individually, and the things you're doing out there to kind of say, what are we thinking about? How are we looking at things, and how are we changing the game? So it's really kind of, humbling and cool to hear, one of our own, get honored for the thought they're doing. So kudos to you, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to TK and Lucas and, all the crew over there. Humbling, to say the least. Also, thank you, Fred. Appreciate you. That was definitely very humbling to get that notification of being recognized in that way, especially when you're just like, sitting there and get slapped with an email. It's kind of fun, so
you were talk. Like, I thought all I did was bitch at everybody.
Pretty much. Yeah. I'm like,
what do you think? What What do you think's important in that space right now? I mean, I think it's interesting if you think in terms of just like workplace violence that's now included in the home, and
Yeah.
now the idea that we have to now include safety measures and include education measures for employees at home, and now we're getting ready to come back from this like home to some hybrid thing. And what do you, I mean, what do you think people should be thinking about in terms of protective intelligence, not, either for executives or just in general for workplace violence issues?
So I think first off, as you've seen, or at least I've seen in LinkedIn, like everybody's got a GSOC, right? Or at least hiring for one or making one or whatever. And I say that that is the question: is what does your GSOC do, and what's it designed to do, and is protective intelligence a part of it, right?
Right.
And I think you almost answered part of the question with how you asked it, which was, what is protective intelligence? What do we need to look for? And with all of these changing things in the environment, what do we look for? Well, we look exactly for those changes in the environment. I think one of the things that I've always been very, very against was using the person of interest as the center point for your protective intelligence, because there are so many other
Absolutely.
variables that impact your operations that require you to look at them outside of the POI. So, making your principal centric to it, or making your building or workplace centric to it. I think, even if you just look at any of the data, like you were talking about, all the workplace violence went to home. Now it's domestic violence, and then you open up that faucet, like you said, and all the crap that's been sitting there for a year is going to come flooding out, and it's going to go back into the workplace or back into the airports or back because it's free, and it's, and we don't know how to be free after a year, or we've been cooped up and everybody wants to play Leroy Jenkins. So again, on the human side is it's looking for changes in behavior, right? It's looking for weather impacts. It's looking for travel and transportation impacts. It's all those operational impacts, any variable that can impact your operation positively or negatively that you can leverage. That's what protective intelligence is. It's not clearing alarms, right? It's not, it's not like, that can be part of it, right? I mean, as you do some analysis on your alarms, like, around the buildings that protect your important things, but oftentimes that, we got protective intelligence. Great. What do? Well, we get a news feed every day. Well, that's better than nothing, but I think to delve down into it, it needs a lot. There are a lot more needs.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, all that stuff starts with asking questions. Some call it requirements, information requirements, intelligence requirements, but again, like understanding like what is it that we need from others, and what is it that others need from us? I think that's where the SOC, whether it's a CSOC, a GSOC, a VSOC, a LSOC,
whatever
an
the
element
fuck
of
it is,
PSOC, your mom's SOC, whatever.
Yeah. Your pink
And
sock.
as we move forward, I mean, I work for an organization. At one point, we did some internal stuff. There was like 5 different SOCs, and I thought to myself, this is ludicrous.
But we do it
SOC.
differently. We just do it differently.
Yeah.
Well, somebody asked
by
about
the way, while we're
Fusion Cell too, which I think is different.
Yeah.
A Fusion Cell I think is a little bit different, right? Because it integrates your operations. One is a security operations center. The other one's integrate your operations. But if they're all siloed, everybody's got their own thing going on. That doesn't really make any sense, But we're different.
Well, then you have intelligence monitoring centers, and we have an intelligence monitoring center over here. They don't speak to the alarm folks over here. None of them speak to the folks monitoring the digital side over here. And oh, by the way, we have a whole nother group over here that's doing social media monitoring for branding.
Dumb.
Yeah, and if you're part of an organization, let's just put all the individuals aside. But hey, if you're an individual, you can take this in, and when you consult, you can think like, why do we have all this? Why don't we save money, have one apparatus, have different seats in this apparatus? Everyone shares the resources, and then on the big board, instead of saying, oh, we can look at it on our HoloLens or whatever else we're doing, we have shared intelligence or information requirements.
Right. Well, I look at it. So I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. Right. And as we break it down, we say, I like to know what can hurt me, what can hurt the organization, and what can help us. And like you said, and then who does it need to go to? Who does that information need to go to, right? For action. And oftentimes we see, whether it's protective intelligence or GSOC or whatever it is, all the information comes in, but then it doesn't go anywhere, right? And that tends to be a harder sell for, well, who wants the information? I don't know. Just pick somebody and send it to them. And then,
Yeah.
give them some context and see if they, how can this help you? I've built, I don't know, two or three, maybe four over, over a little while. And that's the hardest part, is well, it's not the hardest part, finding the customer. It's the hardest part is just identifying the value that you have, shaping it accordingly, and then delivering it. Then you'll find out pretty quickly that people like what you're doing. They get freaked out first, like, why am I getting this info? But then they tend to, find value in it. And sometimes you have to tell them what that value is, but it works out well.
So I've been finishing up a white paper on this like physical digital security efforts. And, I'll use the word convergence, but there's probably a better word because I feel it's overused. But, McChrystal, who one of my favorite McChrystal quotes is, it takes a network to defeat a network. But there's another one I think that really also speaks to these shared efforts, which is like sharing information would help build relationships, and the two together would kindle a new, coherent, adaptive entity that could win the fight.
Well, that's what it's all about, right?
Exactly. It's like saying, like, I'm over here. I may not care about this, but oh, wait a minute. They're talking about something that affects EP. Yeah. Okay, I need to move that over there. And at the end of the day, if we can get on that, stop me if you heard this one before, common operating information.
Yeah. Never.
Then everyone can say, we're all saying it in the same way with the same definition. So when it goes to the C-suite or it goes to decision makers, then it means and it says the same. So when it comes back down, we all get the same understanding. We got to get over these fights about what tribe has planted their flag first. Who cares? Bad guys are going great. You guys argue. I'm going to slip right through the crack.
Exactly. Well, that's the funny thing, is that even just the information transfer, right? Intelligence transfer up, decisions transfer down, having everybody in the same room, reading the same email or getting the same message provides the same context, rather than, 43 people getting a different message and they got to translate it, et cetera. I'm going to argue against what you said about convergence being overused. I think the word might be overused, but I think it's under implemented. Oh yeah, we're good.
No, totally agree. And that's exactly what I mean, is it's something that somebody picked up in a seminar somewhere, and then all of a sudden you had all CISOs and other folks using it. But there are some out there that are doing a really good job in comprehending it and said, hey, I'm doing it. I'm thinking about like the CSO for Fannie Mae and some other folks that I've spoke to. But then there's this role like, I'm going to pick up convergence. And at the end of the day, it's like, but for reals with a Z, what do we mean by that? What are we doing? How are we doing it?
Yeah, it's like active shooter. Do you want active shooter with that? Or do you want convergence with that? Like, it's all that all the time. Yeah. You were saying that you read some things. You were talking about, convergence and protective intelligence, et cetera. And you had mentioned that you'd read something about SOC analysts, right? So whether SOC or freaking whatever you want to call it, but talked about the skills the analysts need to be successful. And
so there's a great piece, and it's by John Edwards. It was in CSO. I think it was back on the 5th. I'm looking at our notes here, and we can pop this up on LinkedIn or show notes or however we do that. And he says top 5 skills an SOC analyst needs. But I think, Chris, we can agree once we go through these that any analyst, whether it's in here he's talking about cyber, but in general, I think any analyst at an SOC could use. One is collaboration, aptitude and drive. 2, critical thinking, which I think should be number 1. 3, an inquisitive mind. 4, strong fundamental skills. SOC analysts should possess fluency in key, technologies, attack methodologies, et cetera. And then 5, the ability to work under pressure. And I was like, yeah, that's great. You don't have to, that's great for anyone. I mean, we could add, and I think I did post this over on LinkedIn before, and a couple of our folks like Phil Grindell and some others added some things to it. But I do think at the end of the day, I mean, don't you agree? Those are like skills that any SOC analyst, whether it's protective or whether it's a risk analyst or a cyber SOC person. I mean, those are great skills for anyone. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, basic skills across the board. How do you execute? I would say, even, Intel analysts or SOC analysts or however you want to call them, they're not, that's a relatively new role in the space. And I think, those folks who came from the military, the government would argue that, civilians don't know how to do it, right? And I would probably argue back that they probably do. It doesn't take much. And at one point you're a civilian and you just, you're institutionalized. So this is a great jump off point for, looking for hiring an analyst. As a matter of fact, I didn't use this, but, we hired our first one for one of the GSOC projects I'm working on. And those are exactly the skills that she demonstrated just through the interview process, right? I mean, there was no dance monkey dance. It was, here's what we're looking for. Here are the attributes, and this gal demonstrated them pretty quickly. So it was very, very cool.
I mean, you can teach folks a lot of the technical stuff, but critical thinking, and especially collaboration, like, hey, what do I know? What do I have? Who needs to know? Who have I told?
Right. It's harder to teach that, and then how do you do that as a core function, not necessarily as like, I need to collaborate. Okay. And then you go down your checklist, that's it's not awesome. It's not awesome.
Well, and think about it too, for like the close protection community. Collaboration, yes. Critical thinking, absolutely.
Yeah.
Inquisitive mind, every freaking day.
Yeah.
Anyone's advanced work. And then strong fundamental skills, 100%.
Yeah. That's like a cheat sheet.
I don't know. Yeah. It struck me as something that I think is, again, I'll repost it, or we can put it up on LinkedIn when we put this up. But, just good fundamental skills.
I found that a lot of these, and whoever's on CSO is going to freaking probably come after me, but they can bring it. There's a lot of great information there, right? But just like you said, it doesn't, and I know the freaking, SOC analysts, it's, SEO driven, get more searches or whatever, but you can almost input the noun, right? You can just replace it with whatever, or the adjective, whatever analyst or whatever, because there was another link to to that article, which is why CISOs must be students of the business, right? And you're like, oh Jesus, I want to be a CISO, so I should get that figured out. Well, if you realize really what it's talking about is that if you want to have value in your organization, you have to know what your business does and how your business generates revenue, and then your impact on that, right? And that's a discussion that we've had, on Clubhouse, and it trickles down from the top, you name it, to the bottom person, right? We have to know how do we make money, right? How does the business make money, or how do we save costs, or what does that look like? What business are we in? And I think oftentimes we forget, because we're so good at being that protective expert, that I don't care what business we're in. This is my job and my role.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's cool for your first 3 years, but after that, you kind of need to know how you conduct business, so you can have an impact on that, so that you can continue to work in that organization. And I think I guess what my message would be this: if you go to CSO online, you're looking at these, don't just get wrapped around the axle about, oh, that's got to just be for the CISO. It's it's a quick read. It's a very, very impactful article. And if you look at almost any CEO, CFO, C-suite person, the reason that they're there is that they're an expert in what they do, but they're also an expert in business and business operations, right? Look at any chief technology officer. It's not a nerd that they keep in the basement, because he has to be able to run the business as well. He has to understand the market. He has to understand, competition. He has to understand all the forces that the organization faces. So I would say, well done, CSO, for the SEO piece. And if you're out there and you're looking to just have a quick read about impact, I think check those articles out. Good things.
Well, I think you make a good point. I mean, don't just get locked in like, hey, I'm only going to read the one magazine, whether it's Black Belt or Skill Set or, read,
Do people
Soldier Fortune?
Is that still in publication? There's been a lot of ninja shit going on around here lately.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'll find out. I think it is. But my point is, like, you can always find something, and if it catches your eye, it might be worth like 30 seconds of a scan and say, well, how does that apply?
Yeah.
It either applies to, like we were saying earlier, look, if you're in a corporate structure, then, at some point you're running some type of business. If you're a supplier, you're running a business. If you're an individual, you're running an individual business. So, you're in that supply chain somewhere. So if you see something, it's always good to ask, like, I have a file folder of articles, and I, on them along the side, I write, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to us? Why do we care? And what's the important piece? So anyways, that was an interesting piece. Something else you and I were talking about earlier was, speaking of CISO,
hang on,
CSO.
before you get off that subject. Black Belt magazine still in production. 60 years. There it is. Yeah, pretty wild.
Wow.
Good times.
I'm going to have to pick up. I'm going to have to. You know what? If you're out there and you read Black Belt, let us know. I mean, I read it a long time ago. I'm going to go pick up I'm going to go find an issue of that and read it and see what's in it and what it's like now. I haven't seen it in a while. So you and I are getting Black Belt magazine t-shirts.
Get some. I like it.
Get some. Indeed. So speaking of CSO, segue.
Nice.
The ODNI, which is puts out a report every year, and they talk, Office of Director of National Intelligence, ODNI. They put out a report. They put out a regular report. Their latest one, Global Trends 2040, came out. It should be of no surprise. However, it was highlighted in the article that the big leading actors will continue to do their thing on the cyber side: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And in that annual threat assessment to the U.S. intelligence community, they basically came out and, said, hey, look, here's the deal. Not much is going to change. China's going to keep focusing on cyber espionage and information suppression. This isn't Randolph talking or Story. This is ODNI telling you this.
I thought I didn't see the report, but I hope it's a very short paragraph, because I'm not sure we need a whole lot of taxpayer dollars to freaking sort that one out.
Well,
thanks for that,
I would
guys.
say,
thanks.
Especially for it's an unclassified document. You can look it up. You can find it. I would say, if you're an analyst, it's a good thing to read. It's a good thing to understand. It goes far more. In essence, it talks about China and their push for power. It talks about Russian actions, Iranian actions, North Korean actions, transnational issues. There's a piece about COVID-19. They talk about instability, Afghan, India and Pakistan, Middle East, Asia, et cetera, et cetera. It's probably, I don't know how many, 30 pages ish.
Yeah, I think I saw it also. I just didn't get an opportunity to read it yet. I do wonder though. Did you read the whole thing?
Or is it just I have read most of it, and we're doing. In fact, I'm working on a piece with my own team about what we feel is important for for the private sector in there. I will tell you, Chris. Former Microsoft guy. I ran the global intel team there. We consumed these things every time they came out, and always ask, so what? What's important to us? What's important to, you got to take things like that, and you got to take things like the 10K and say, where do they mesh? What do we got to think about?
Right.
Other interesting thing is like, you take China has, comes out with these China 5-year plans. And they basically put out like, here's what we're going to do over the next 5 years to plus up what we're doing.
Right.
And then from that, you could almost infer, if you take time and you think about it, like, well, what sector am I in? What sectors do I affect? What things could happen here that could affect my sector in terms of maybe supply chain or espionage or information security or digital security or even, physical issues. But
right.
So yes, I do consume these things. I'll finish reading it this weekend.
So one of the things that I found it to be interesting, you probably just didn't get there yet, which was got it about the other actors, right? I mean, okay, cool. Actually do have the report right here. But I think the interesting thing again is what will be the non-state actors, which is not really addressed because it talks about really just global threat, right? And conflicts, et cetera. And I think the next piece, because obviously as a nation, those are the things that we're concerned with. But I would say, and those are the ones with the biggest hammers, right? But I would say what else are our threats, right? Is it water? I mean, because I know in the West here, we're about to get smashed with a drought, right? I mean, we've already been told before the season starts that the nearest lake will not open, right? No boats, which is just now there's gonna be, riots at the lake. But I think understanding the other threats in the, on the horizon helps us not be so responsive, but really helps us react and understand what is in threatscape, either at the national or the corporate level. And then we can think about what does protection look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what do those models look like? It's not going to be Chris standing next to the guy, or shouldn't be that's the last line of defense. All right. So what else do we push out there? What does it look like? And understanding that
I remember
it's helpful.
I remember being in high school and, I can't remember if it was Model UN or whatever we were doing in class. And, we had to and the issue, and this was back in the 80s, and the issue was water rights. And I remember a teacher distinctly saying, he was like, I won't see it in my time, but there'll be a time when people will go to war over water.
Yeah.
I mean, and we saw issues, we saw tension in, please, if I get this wrong, somebody out there, I'm sure will correct me, but we saw tensions in India. What was it, 2-3 years ago with regards to water scarcity?
Yeah.
I mean, and now you think of other things like heavy metals. And I don't mean the band or I don't mean the song or the movie.
Right.
But,
essentially resources, right? I mean, essentially that's what, What you think about the complexities, and you were in the military, so you have an understanding of this. But when people are talking about, the recent, or being on the recent brink potentially of, like people are openly discussing civil war, right? What do you? And it was even in mainstream media. What do you look at, or what do you look for, in terms of, everybody's looking at like, well, I got my neighborhood, and you're like, okay, great, but people with big guns that are paid to hold big guns are going to go push towards securing resources, right? Like, we're going to secede from this place. No, okay, what does that look like? You and a bunch of hill jacks rolling in your trucks to someplace to go face off of Bradley that's securing the dam? Probably not so much, right? So again,
this fresh water is ours.
Exactly.
I think not.
Understand the consequences. But anyways, so I think that's just from a threat perspective, looking at that environment becomes helpful and can be life-saving.
Speaking of threats.
Oh, I thought you were going to say hill jacks.
Threats. No, speaking of hill jacks.
Yeah.
I am from Indiana. Speaking of threats, did you see this bit in Inc. magazine about the coming cicada swarm?
So first off, is it Inc. as an INC, or are you talking about a tattoo mag?
Yeah.
Inc. Okay.
Inc. magazine.
Yeah, Inc.
No.
No, that was recent,
I think,
right?
Yeah, it just I just saw it pop up in my Feedly feed. And I was like, what is this? And it says, and I quote from this is Amrita Khalid's article. It says billions of cicadas will emerge from the ground from mid-May to June in 15 states in the eastern and southern United States and in Washington, D.C. They're going so far as to say, like, for business owners and emerging from the challenges of the past year, the once every 17-year cicada swarm is generating less enthusiasm. And they're basically saying if you have a wedding, an outdoor wedding or something you're planning,
you're screwed.
Be advised. And of course, cicadas are harmless. They're not going to eat you or anything, but just like the swarm of cicadas.
What is that? What is a cicada?
It's a winged. It's a winged insect, and it sings to attract a male to mate, and then that's it. They're harmless, but they're a pain in the butt. I don't know if you are a baseball fan and anyone recalls many years ago there was a tournament, or there was a playoff game or something that was being played and it was the Tribe playing Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And it went in overtime, and the cicadas woke up, and I'm sure you can find this on YouTube, and the pitcher, who was just trying to maintain his shit with all these things swarming around him, and he's trying to throw a ball, and it looks like snow's falling everywhere, and it's just bugs.
That's gnarly.
So, I mean, but hey, if you're an EP agent in your halls and walls, or you have to stand at post or you're on post at a compound or somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're in one of these states. I mean,
that sounds.
I read
brutal.
that today. I was like, you know what? That we had murder hornets. Now we have cicada swarms, and who knows what else is coming down.
So awesome, dude. I
think not.
No, it sounds horrible. I mean, especially if you're out riding a motorcycle and then just get smashed. Oh well. Well, better than murder hornets, I would say.
Oh yeah, but I mean, all that stuff is just a pain in the. What a pain, and especially if you're working, you have to be outside. If you're doing covert protection or something like that, and you just got to deal with all this, and you're trying to maintain concentration and not lose it. Especially if you have any type of hankiness towards bugs.
You said hinky, and we're talking about, and we're on conversation close protection. This is awesome. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
Hey man, nothing but the finest. Moving on with threats. I'm sure you saw this. We were talking about a little earlier that there's this a group of 20 Israelis are under investigations for illegally designing, producing, and selling armed loitering missiles, also known as suicide drones, to an unnamed Asian country. Reported on, I saw it on the Drive in the War Zone, article by Thomas Nudick. It was, I think this is a February 11th article, but I just saw it. So many people might have already saw it and said, hey, dude, we already got that. But it just popped up for me, and I read it, and I was like, wait a minute. Do we think it's going to go after Chris or Chuck? No, but, generally what makes it way in.
Might after we just said this. It might.
My name's Brad Christian.
Well, so, first off, it's pretty, it can be pretty crazy, right? Essentially it would be, it loiters. You just look at all the disparate technology, facial recognition or even object recognition or whatever the case is. And at the end of the day, you could probably, I don't know to what level that these were, but you could rock a bunch of, Mavic Mini 2s and just fire them out there and kind of wreak havoc,
Yeah, especially when you bring up, innovation and how things rapidly move forward, Moore's law, all that stuff. And now, you add AI and you add facial recognition. Like, hey, I'm going to stay on station as long as I, maybe I'm maybe in the not too distant future. It's self-powered by solar. I'm going to stay on station as long as I can, and boom, there's Chris, and now I'm going to engage.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, you know, you know, I guess it's the new drone swarm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's replicating it so rapidly really from anything, right? I mean, just not even technology, but I guess what I would say threat standpoint, you know, like, hey, look at my drone, we do some real estate stuff. And then, hey, you see, you know, people dropping grenades in Syria or whatever. I mean, it's a freaking, you know, we talk about the suicide bomber as a perfect weapon, right? Because it's the smartest, you know, weapon that you can have, because it can decide on the moment's notice, if it's committed, decide on a moment's notice to hit a better target than it's designed for, right? Well, now you take the human element out of it, because there was a lot of failures, so that those suicide bombers had to have backups and freaking people just to clack them off if they weren't, you know, as committed. But now you've got a drone that you can make that decision. The operator can make it real time. Even if it's loitering, right? And it alerts you, hey, there's my target, and the operator can pick up and drive it right in. You know, it's just, there's so many things.
Or even like, as you say, like a drone that's doing surveillance from on high, like, hey, target is moving.
Yep.
And now you can wake up, you know, you have all these other things. Okay. Now you can wake the machine up. But, you know, essentially, those could be used on the good side too. Like, hey, you know, target is moving. Everybody wake up. Here is what we're doing, or have the system wake up, or the you know, security chain wake up to protect, and also, you know, inform the digital folks like we have movement. But I mean, it's cautious, and it's fascinating, and it's scary to think about those, and then think about how all that stuff eventually makes its way into the civilian side.
Right.
And then, you know, how that affects and informs the way the work is done moving forward. I mean, it's just all that more important that at some point we will have somebody. It's like, you know, things we saw overseas now will manifest itself at some point in our lifetime in the private sector too.
Right.
Where are we going? What do we do?
I think this lends itself to the discussion we were talking about earlier, which was about looking for those future threats, right? Like, and you know, who's gonna do what? What does that look like? Like, we're not really concerned with the, you know, Chinese version of the cruise missile, right? Because that's not something we, you know, if we were worried about that, we got different problems, right? But what we should be doing is worry about how the technology used in different threats, to include war zones, can be used against us, right? And if you're like, yeah, bro, you're good because I'm right here, you know, and I got your body armor or whatever, right? I mean, those are the threats that we need to be looking in the future. You know, not only, you know, what's going on from a cyber perspective, digital perspective, physical threat, proximity perspective, but again, what can reach out and hurt us from where, and what does it look like? And I don't mean snipers. I mean, I think this drone thing is a very, very good idea. Hey, we're at this place, and they have a cool drone swarm that's going to make all these designs, right? Well, you might think that that's going to be awesome. You're watching for that, but again, why are 3 of them, you know, separating themselves from the swarm?
Yeah, and these loitering drones, as they're called, also are super precise. I mean, they, from what I've read and what I followed up on from the article, I mean, they're very precise. They avoid a lot of collateral damage. I mean, and it brings that idea of, like, you know, asymmetric warfare. I mean, it's kind of another word like convergence. It kind of fell away, but, you know, now I think we're seeing that manifest itself for reals. Not this is not me saying that it hasn't been there all along, but I think it's getting to the point now where Jane and Joe Sixpack are realizing, like, you know, these are issues and things that we need to think about in our own lives.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And, you know,
it goes back, you know, like when we were talking to Clint about, you know, and again, we're not giving anything away, but, you know, you discussed this idea of, like, it's not being a survivalist. It's just having the right mentality when you're working or when you're going around to consider these other things.
Right. Well, I think part of it is that Jane and Joe's six pack don't necessarily get paid to think about those things, and they are probably sitting around going, okay, great, how do I use this to my advantage, or how do I, maybe they're considering how to defend against it. But I think as somebody who's paid to consider those threats, maybe it's something to think about. I don't know. What do I know?
Yeah. Anyways, just interesting stuff to think about and consider as we think about the way we do our own work. I mean, especially, look, we have a number of folks that listen that are PSD. They're still overseas. They're doing, private military contracting or protective security details. I mean, these are all things that affects those segments of the industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think we've said it before that war is a great testing ground, right? So is terrorism. So what you see in a war zone today, regardless of where it is, you will likely see it and get closer to the fold tomorrow. So
yeah,
something to consider.
So are you listening to any good podcasts lately? What have you been picking up on? I heard a couple of things you said you were talking about, but anything you might recommend to add?
Been listening to listen to a lot of.
I'm a big fan of the Angry Therapist as well, by the way.
Are you? Yeah. He's John Kim. He's a good dude. I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson's 12 keys for life, or whatever the case is. Just a brilliant mind, and
he's got a great free. He's got a great free, I don't know if you call it a seminar, but it's like an email branded, thing on marketing. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Too.
He's given just a bunch of content out, as he kind of builds his brand, but, great guy to listen to if you're trying to understand the psychology of the mind, right? I mean, and in layman's terms, and it's just a fascinating person to listen to, and obviously very opinionated, but I don't know, I think it's very, very cool.
I like him. I've been listening to the Lawfare a lot lately. I don't always listen to everything they put out, but they had today they just put one out on spy writing in the real world that I'm looking forward to listening to, and they had something on national security was the last one. I've really been enjoying that more lately. It's popping up more and more in my feed, and I've listened to Mark Devine, The Unbeatable Mind, former Navy SEAL, but I kind of like his mindset and the way he kind of approaches things.
Yeah, I've been listening to, and we're trying to get him on the show too. Mike Gillette does a mindset thing, and or class, and just to refresh. And the cool thing about Mike is that he was a protector. Then he transitioned to coaching and some other things. So I think that's very cool. And I'm looking forward to I've listened to some of his work, and I'm looking forward to get him on the show. I also like Modern Warfare, or Modern War Institute. They put on a really good podcast.
That's funny. I was scanning through it. I'm listening. That's my fourth one down.
Oh, really?
That's awesome. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
Yeah. So they do that. Urban Warfare Project is really, really good too. And then I like the Spear. The Spear is just,
check out this new one I just found called the Cognitive Crucible. And it's done by a lot of folks that were from the information operations or are in or were in the military information operations community or are in it still. And it some really interesting things about, about info ops, about digital stuff. And it's not just like a digital security podcast. It's not going to talk to you about the most, advanced persistent threats or something, but it's going to talk about like disinformation at a different level. And they pretty much break them down in Barney style, so folks like you and I can understand it. But if you get a chance, there's a gentleman named Austin Branch, and this is no plug. We don't get anything for this, folks, but last year in September, he did one on the Army's first information operations officer. And if you're even curious about that stuff at all, super interesting. Worked with Austin before in the military, super smart guy. And that's something that's been popping up that I've been listening to as well. Of course, CyberWire and Jocko and all the others.
Yeah, I think first of all, the Cognitive Crucible looks pretty awesome. And then I think, Jocko's deal was cool, but I think
I don't listen to everyone, but
yeah,
when I do, I generally enjoy it.
Yeah, I thought it was cool listening to him get interviewed by Jordan Peterson. Thought that was kind of cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And of course, Chris, Conversations in Close Protection. I've heard good things about that podcast.
It's a pretty cool podcast,
I mean, I've heard some things.
It's all right.
I've heard some things. So, what else? What else we need to talk about as we close out this edition of our monthly shop talk?
You're seriously? I got nothing. I got nothing. I would say, we kind of close with it, but at the end of the day, we need to look at what's going on around us and make sure that we're prepared to execute. I know everybody's, raring to go, and no matter where you're at and what you're doing, I think it's going to be important to understand, tactically, operationally and strategically, your approach to what's going on, because things have and will change, and people will be on edge, and it won't be like it used to. And, even though we're trying to get back to wherever it was, it won't be like that. And I think it's going to be important to understand and address that, because we don't want to get caught out and underestimate the situation that we're in.
No, absolutely. I think you hit it spot on. Look, people are getting ready. Like you said, we're restless, and it's the analogy we said earlier. Like, the floodgates are going to come back on. It's going to stress the system. Some people will be stressed out by that, because now we've gone a year of sitting here. Now we're going to get back out there. That's going to stress some people out. It's going to, right when we got used to working from home, the majority of us, we're going to go back to either working at work or some hybrid mentality. It's going to be an interesting time. And I think, as we're seeing now manifesting in the news, I mean, it's 2021's just continues to be the tumultuous dumpster fire that 2020 was, hopefully getting better by the end of the summer. But yeah, absolutely. It's more, if there was ever a time to keep it on a swivel, in the most sensible manner, now is it.
Yeah. And I think, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, but I would say the but is we're not going to ease into it. We're going to go into it, and we're going to hit a wall, and there's going to be a ton of pushback, and all the chips are going to fall, and everyone's going to lose their minds, and then it'll kind of settle a little bit. But we seem to be aware of what's going on around us. And I know that people are like, whatever, dude, I got it. I'm freaking, John Wick's my bitch. But that's not what I'm talking about.
Although we got to check out this new one that Peck sent us, so we'll report back on that new show. He said that was the John Wick.
I saw it, right? Because I was looking for it. Look, dude, come on. I mean, I thought it was entertaining. I will say it's entertaining.
I haven't watched it yet, so
should I watch it?
It's on my list. It's in my queue. Should I watch it or no?
Yeah, you should watch it. But I mean, it's by the Wick producers, and it's just like, I'm like, oh, it's kind of a older guy, John Wick. It's
Jonathan Wick.
It's John Wick Senior, or whatever. But no, I thought it was good.
Awesome. Well, we'll give it a shot before we shit talk Peck, although we'll do that anyways. Hey, catch us on Clubhouse. What's coming up, Chris? Any thoughts or highlights as to that?
So we've thrown up some. I was motivated and kind of came up with some topics so that people can look forward to them, instead of like, what are we talking about today when Chris pops it up. So we've got it Monday nights at 7. We've gotten some feedback from some folks that, hey, we're in Atlantic time or we're in, East Coast time, and that's a little late. So we might look at making some adjustments, but we've tried to make it easier for people to choose if they want to jump on or not. And we do get some really, first off, I think interesting conversations going,
Definitely.
fairly high level. And I think the next thing is that the attendees are pretty solid, a solid group of consultants, managers, directors, and practitioners. So I enjoy it. Feedback is that other folks enjoy it, and we're slowly building our group over there. So we'd love to have you join us.
Yeah, definitely a higher level conversation that we have, and really a lot of folks stepping up on the dais, so to speak, to give some conversation. So we really appreciate it. And as you said, we're looking at some other times to deliver maybe some lunchtime stuff, some other things, as we look at it. We also have episode 100 coming up. We're looking forward to it. Some interesting things planned around it, and then there's going to be some time for us to sit down and start working on that next project between the two of us. So really looking forward to doing that as well, and I have been inspired lately. So thanks to you, my friend, for inspiring me. As we get going.
Nice. I was not aware.
Yeah. No,
very cool.
So, all right, there you have it. I think that's it. I think we've shot the bolt, as they say, for this episode of Shop Talk. This has been Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph. Across the digital divide, as always, the substantiated Mr. Chris Story. As we said, watch your six, wash your hands, and keep your heads down.
Good times.
You've been listening to an episode of Conversations in Close Protection. Email us at protectiontalk@outlook.com and find us on your preferred podcast platform. Please take a moment and consider rating us to help others find Conversations in Close Protection too. Look for us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and other social media spots. Conversations in Close Protection is brought to you by your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our engineering editor is the mighty Aaron Peck. Please remember that all opinions expressed do not represent those of any organizations or companies the hosts are affiliated with. This is Rachel saying watch your six and keep your heads down.